By their definitions, discussed in Article 1278, compensation refers to a sort of balancing between two obligations. Thus, or also, it involves a figurative operation of weighing two obligations simultaneously in order to extinguish them to the extent in which the amount of one is covered by the other. Thus, compensation is the extinguishment in the concurrent amount of the obligations of those persons who are reciprocally debtors and creditors of one another. Payment, on the other hand, refers or as defined in the Article 1232, refers to the delivery of money or thing in obligations to give, the doing of a thing in obligations to do, or the desistance from doing something or obligations not to do. So, to distinguish compensation from payment, number one, compensations allows partial extinguishment while payment does not allow so since payment must be complete and indivisible as a rule. Then number two, compensation as legal basis takes place operation of law while payment necessitates action or delivery. The choice made shall take effect as based on Article 1205. When the choice has been expressly given to the creditor, the obligation shall cease to be alternative from the day when the selection has been communicated to the debtor. Until then, the responsibility of the debtor shall be governed by the following rules. Number one, if one of the things is lost through fortuitous event, he shall perform the obligation by delivering that which the creditor should choose from among the remainder, or that which, if only one subsists. Number two, if the loss of one of the things occurs through the fault of the debtor, the creditor may claim any of those subsisting, or the price of that which, through the fault of the former, has disappeared, with a right to damages. And number three, if all the things are lost through the fault of the debtor, the choice by the creditor shall fall upon the price of any one of them, also with indemnity for damages. The same rule shall be applied to the obligations to do or not to do in case one, some, or all of the prestations should become impossible. By definition, an indivisible obligation is one the object of which in its delivery or performance is not capable of partial fulfillment. Thus, stated in the Article 1224, a joint indivisible obligation gives rise to the indemnity for damages from the time any one of the debtors does not comply with his undertaking. The debtors who may have been ready to fulfill their promises shall not contribute to the indemnity beyond the corresponding portions of the price of the thing or of the value of the service in which the obligation consists. Article 1223 states that the divisibility or indivisibility of the things that are the subject or object of the obligation in which there is only one debtor and only one creditor does not alter or modify the provisions of Chapter 2 of this title. Thus, as a true test of determining divisibility, it shall be determined by the character of the prestation in each particular case. Moreover, obligation is presumed divisible when it has for its object the following. Number 1, execution of a certain number of days of work. Number 2, accomplishment of work by metrical units. And number 3, analogous things which by their nature are susceptible of partial performance. By definition, a penal clause is an accessory undertaking to assume greater liability on the part of the obliger in case of breach. So, as an effect of incorporating this in an obligation, Article 1226 states that in obligations with a penal clause, the penalty shall substitute the indemnity for damages and the payment of interest in case of non-compliance if there is no stipulation to the contrary. Nevertheless, damages shall be paid if the obliger refuses to pay the penalty or is guilty of fraud in the fulfillment of the obligation. The penalty may be enforced only when it is demandable in accordance with the provisions of this code. Thus, this article deals with obligations with a penal clause where the penalty in said clauses shall substitute the indemnity for damage and payment of interest in case of a breach, if there is no stipulation to the contrary. If the obliger refuses to pay the penalty or is guilty of fraud in the fulfillment of the obligation, damages shall be paid by the said obligor.